Log on, tune in, find out. Another good idea from Cambridge.
Professor Serge Vaudenay from EPFL. I'm not going to try and pronounce that. Ecole, Polytechnique, Fédérale, Lausanne, I guess is how you say it, right? Serge's title is a very intriguing one, which has actually caused quite a lot of controversy on the internet. If you want some amusement, go and look at Jonathan Katz's blog. Not right now, not during the talk, obviously, after the talk, where there's some interesting discussion around what could this title possibly mean. And I guess we're all fascinated to find out. So, Serge, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, thank you very much for inviting me. So, actually, when Kenny invited me to this workshop, is cryptographic theory practically relevant? So, I was pretty excited. I said, oh, I want to be there. There's going to be a big fight. What he didn't mention in his invitation is that I had to give a talk. So later I had to wonder what kind of talk can I give, and since he stressed me to have a title, so I came up with this crazy title with some random adjectives. And so I'm going to talk to you about a few cases which may illustrate the gap between theory and practice in cryptography. So actually, I will mention 3 cases, and I will start with a case about cryptanalysis, RC4 cryptanalysis. So it's related to some paper I published with some of my students. So it started with a PhD of Martin Vuanius, and Puyan Sheperdad joined us to work on this cryptanalysis of RC4, and he's going to submit his PhD this year. So last year at Ecole 2011, we had a paper about the analysis of RC4 with some results, which is mostly theoretical. So this will be the theory part, the Eurocrypt paper. And we'll see that in this paper, there are a few problems. So what we wanted to do is to analyze what we use to read our emails, like in this room. So it's not based on web, it may be based on WPA. But anyway, so there is a security protocol to protect the wireless connection, and we wanted to break it. So it's based on RC4, and in RC4 there is a secret key. The secret key consists of several bytes, and we wanted to recover all these bytes. So how does it work? So we have a byte X that we want to recover from the key. So what we do is that we define a counter for every possible value of this byte X. So we have 256 counters by X. In these counters, there is the counter for the correct value, and there are 255 counters for the incorrect ones. So what we did is that we assume that all the counters when we make statistic, all counters are independent. When we make statistic, everything is normally distributed, so the counters are normally distributed with the same variance, and also with all the bad counters with the same expected values. So of course, the good counter and the bad counters don't have the same expected values because there is bias, and this is what we want to analyze precisely. So this was in our Eurocrypt paper, and after Eurocrypt, then we say, so maybe we can try to implement or to have some practical result about it. And we realize that the variances are not the same. So the variance of the good counter and the variance of the bad counter is not the same at all. So our assumption in our Eurocrypt paper was wrong. So, and also something that we did is that we try to estimate what is the rank of the correct counter in a list of 256 counters. So to estimate the rank, we define a random variable, which is the sum of some random variables which are equal to 1 if a counter is greater than the good one. So like this, we can see what is the place of the correct counter in our list. So in our paper, we say, so it's a sum of random variables. So we have many random variables. We just assume that these random variables are independent. And then finally, the sum will be normally distributed. But when it goes to practice and we realize that these random variables are not independent, so it's another mistake. So anyway, so we can continue even though they are not independent. We just assume they are normally distributed. But oops, when we look at the distribution, it doesn't look like a normal distribution at all. So then, in order to recover, we use a theorem which says that if a random variable is not normally distributed, then it's Poisson distributed. So we assume that the random variable is Poisson distributed, but then the expected value is different from the variance, which is very strange for a Poisson distribution. So we spent some hard time in trying to recognize the distribution of this random variable, and finally we find a nice distribution, which is a Polya distribution, which perfectly matches the one that we observe in practice. So this Polya distribution is used for tornado prediction. We didn't spend so much time on a theory to figure out why it is a Polya distribution and not a normal distribution or whatever. But now we have a better analysis which fits to practice. So we had to rebuild the theory and to fix some problems in our paper. So what this example shows is that in many cryptanalysis papers, we make some heuristic assumptions, and these assumptions are often falsifiable, but not many people check this assumption in practice. So I think that it's a mistake, and that people should try to check this assumption in practice if they match some practical experiments. So I think that the theoretical cryptanalysis is not so relevant if we don't make such kind of experiment. So in theory, we could break everything. We just assume that RC4 is weak, and then we show that we can break it. But then the problem is how to check this in practice. So I think that in order to support some theoretical result about cryptanalysis, we should have some practical experiment. So practical support is actually necessary to make the theory relevant for cryptanalysis, and this demonstrates that practical cryptography is relevant for theory. But this was not actually the question. Okay, so we answer to another question. So now we can move to another subject, which is maybe related to what I put in the title about deniable authentication. So deniable authentication is related to a few things that I made with my students. So actually we started with by looking at the standard which is used in biometric passport. So it's a very concrete and practical protocol. So in a biometric passport, so a passport is an identity document. So its purpose is to give the identity of the holder. So you have an RFID reader, so there is an RFID chip inside. And in this protocol, essentially the passport gives the identity of the holder to the reader. So this identity consists of a picture, date of birth, gender, the name, and also it gives a digital signature which binds really all this information together. So the picture is bound to the date of birth, to the true name, and so on. And we think here that it's a bit more than what an identity document should do. So it should just give the identity, but here it's also give a proof that this identity is correct, and this proof can be recorded and given to someone else. So here there is a proof, there is a problem in this protocol, in the sense that this protocol is not deniable. After having given an identity, you cannot deny having given this identity. So the reader can just record this and give this identity to someone else. And since a digital signature is an undeniable proof, this proof is not deniable. So we wanted here, so the problem that we could have is that this reader could leak this identity to someone else. So maybe for most of people it's not a big deal, but for some people want to hide their true official names, they want to hide their true date of birth, or they want to hide their true gender, or whatever, and they don't want it to be published somewhere with a digital signature proving that this information is correct. So in order to leak any digital signature which proves an identity, we would like to prove that this identity is correct in some deniable way. So we want to make this proof deniable. So we want really to prove something, but in a deniable way. So it sounds like zero knowledge, so why not using a zero knowledge protocol in this case? So imagine that the passport holds a digital signature. You can try to prove that it holds a valid digital signature without revealing it in a deniable way using a zero-knowledge protocol. So in a zero-knowledge protocol, you have a prover and the verifier. So the prover may be a passport, and the verifier may be the reader. In the protocol, there is a proof of knowledge in the sense that any algorithm which makes the verifier happy about the protocol must be such that it holds really a witness for this proof, in this case, a digital signature. And also this protocol should not leak any information which could be later used by the verifier, in the sense that if you replace the verifier by any algorithm, a cheating verifier, anything which can be computed by the cheater after this protocol with the prover can be simulated without the prover. So that's the notion of zero knowledge. So in order to prove the possession of an RSA signature, something which is very nice is to use the Guillou-Quisquater protocol, which is a honest verifier zero-knowledge protocol. It's actually a three-move protocol. Imagine that you have a prover who holds a digital signature small x about some message, a formatted message, which is linked to the identity. It's a hash of all the information related to the identity. So this signature x should be such that x to the power e mod n is equal to capital X. So the prover wants to prove that he holds this small x to the verifier without revealing it. The verifier knows this capital X, so it's actually the identity, with no proof that this identity is correct. And then they run this protocol, which is very simple, so I won't go through this protocol. And at the end, after the verification, the verifier is convinced that the prover holds a valid proof. There is just one problem, is that this is a honest verifier zero-knowledge protocol, so it's not fully zero-knowledge. It's zero-knowledge only if the verifier is honest. Actually, if you take this protocol, there is a standard way to cheat, to have a verifier cheating here, by just choosing, so in the normal protocol, he should pick a challenge which is uniformly distributed in a set, and which doesn't depend on the y that he is receiving. So here we could cheat by making this C depending on this value y that he receives. Typically, you can choose C, which is a hash of the message capital X concatenated with y. So this is a cheating way to select the challenge. If he does it, what he receives, the y and the z, becomes some undeniable proof that the prover holds the witness. So actually, it's a standard way. It's a Fiat-Shamir paradigm, which transforms a Sigma protocol into a digital signature scheme. So in order to fix this, we had to introduce some extra extra communication rounds for this. So we take this Guillou-Quisquater protocol, and we had some extra steps with a commitment. So the idea is that the verifier has to commit on his C before he receives y, in order to show that he has selected C before receiving y, and he doesn't choose C adaptively based on the y. So we use here a trapdoor commitment scheme in which there is a trapdoor capital R, which is used to generate a key for the trapdoor. So you have a key for the trapdoor, and then you commit using this key. And at the end, you reveal the trapdoor. So we can show with a trapdoor commitment scheme that this protocol is fully zero knowledge. So we may be happy because now we have a protocol which is deniable and which proves in a deniable way that the prover holds a valid signature of a message if he holds a valid RSA signature. Maybe we can wonder why we need a trapdoor commitment, because actually the functionality of the trapdoor is never used here. So why do we need a trapdoor? We never use a trapdoor here. So actually we need the trapdoor to prove that this protocol is correct. We need a trapdoor to prove that this protocol is actually a proof. So actually we need it to show that if a protocol satisfies, an algorithm satisfies, makes the verifier happy at the end, then he must hold the valid signature. The idea here is that if you take an algorithm and you run it with a verifier, at the end you will get the trapdoor. Then you can rerun the same algorithm, you can rewind the algorithm, rerun with the same parameters, and if he can answer to another challenge, so since you know the trapdoor, you can cheat with a commitment. If you can answer to another challenge, you will get the answer, and with two answers to two different challenges, you can extract this witness X. So it's a standard way to prove that you have a proof of knowledge. So we need this trapdoor to prove that it's actually a proof. But we don't need the proof, so this trapdoor is only needed for a kind of theory behind. So we could try to get rid of this trapdoor to have a more efficient practical protocol. So one way to do it is that instead of using a trapdoor which is generated for this protocol, is to use a common reference string. So we could use a trapdoor which is known by no one at all, and we could use the key that I was putting here, the key of the commitment scheme. It could be just a common reference string. If we have a common reference string, then we get rid of an extra computation, so we have a more efficient protocol. So here we have a pretty nice protocol which is based on a common reference string. So we can prove also that it's fully zero knowledge with a common reference string. We can do even better. Usually the trapdoor commitment schemes are a bit complicated, and we want to be kind with tiny devices such as a passport with a RFID device inside. So we want to simplify this commitment, and we can replace it by a hash function. So instead of using a trapdoor commitment, we use a hash function, and we just say that we assume it behaves like a random oracle. It's another assumption. If you have a random oracle, you have a more efficient commitment here. So you can just commit to your challenge here by using this random oracle. So common reference strings and random oracles are different setup assumptions that we can use in protocols. There is one problem, is that zero knowledge proof is actually proven in the plain model only when you don't have any setup assumption. And some protocols which are zero knowledge in the plain model may be not zero knowledge anymore if you had some setup assumptions. So actually in the common reference string model and in the random oracle model, they are not always deniable. So many protocols are not deniable. So we could have some better protocol, but I think here there is a failure on these deniability notions when we introduce these setup assumptions. And hopefully, since the notion of zero knowledge, which used to be correct in the plain model, happened to be incorrect when we add some setups, then we have to build another theory. So actually it was done by Raphael Pass a few years ago. And here, if you think about this deniability collapse, which is now restored with a new notion of deniability, then we can think that the theoreticians just behave like falling cats. So at the beginning, it doesn't look so good with the notion of deniability, but at the end, they always land on their feet. So now we have a new notion of deniable zero knowledge with setup assumptions, and we can work with it. So okay, so we can now build better protocol with common reference string or random oracle. How about other setups? So maybe you can imagine some other setups. Problem is that in real life there is no common reference string, there is no random oracle, so maybe you can have a more realistic setup assumption. So why not using temper resistance as an assumption? So let's imagine that we have temper-resistant devices. We use it as a setup assumption, and maybe you can have some better protocols. So actually, a few years ago, I introduced a model with a tamper resistance, which can be modeled like this. So imagine that we have a special participant, which is a tamper-resistant device. So it may look like this kind of device where you have a screen, a keyboard, and you can insert some code inside, so some running code. So imagine that you can boot this device with a boot. You have a bootloader. You can load a boot code in this device, and you have a display. And you add the restriction that if you boot this device with the code C, then the device will always show the hash of this code so that anyone looking at the device can check that this device is running the correct code inside. It was booted correctly with the correct code. So imagine that it is tamper resistant, so no one can open it and look at what is inside. So of course, maybe it would contradict what people are doing close to here in Cambridge. But nevertheless, we can start using this assumption and see what kind of protocol we can do. So as for commitment, actually, we can implement commitment very trivially. So if we have this kind of device, I call it a trusted agent, we can define a very simple code which consists of receiving a value, then picking a random SID, a session ID. Then you just display you receive something with this session ID. Then you wait for a new input, and after an input, you just open with the same SID, and you display the value X. Then you have a very trivial protocol in which to commit. Alice wants to commit to some value X, so she first loads this code to the trusted agent. Then she inputs this X to this trusted agent. The trusted agent will display a hash of the code followed by receipt and SIDs, and she can show this to Bob. So Bob, by looking at this code, would be convinced that it's running a correct commitment protocol. He will see that the trusted device receives some value with an SID, and for the opening protocol, so Alice can just send a new input to her device, and then the device will display the value X, so Bob will just see this value X and compare the SID, and so it will be a very trivial commitment protocol. So we can have some very simple protocol like this. We can also have some trivial zero knowledge, by the way. So imagine that the prover loads a code which verifies that you have a correct witness. Then he inserts some X with his witness. Then the device will display, I've checked that X has a witness which was given by this prover. So it gives a bit saying that a correct witness was verified. So then the prover can show his device to the verifier, and the verifier can see that some trusted agent has checked that the prover holds the correct witness. So we can have some very trivial zero knowledge this way. There is one problem now with this setup assumption, is that previously existing protocols may not be deniable anymore. Actually, imagine that you had our previous zero knowledge protocol, and then we introduce this new participant, which is a trusted device, but we introduce it in a malicious way. So before we were using it to define new protocols, but now we can try to introduce this trusted agent in a malicious way. So imagine that now the verifier, which is the RFID reader who receives the identity, will use his trusted agent to load a verification code, and then he will relay all the messages between the prover and this trusted agent. So the trusted agent will just run the verification protocol, the zero knowledge verification protocol, and at the end he will say, okay, the protocol succeeded. But by just showing the fact that the protocol succeeded, it's now an undeniable proof that he has run this protocol. So this protocol is not deniable anymore. It used to be deniable without tamper resistance, but if you introduce a tamper resistance module, it's not deniable anymore. So there is something weird here. Actually, the problem is that this notion of deniability is very fragile, so you can easily break it by using these setup assumptions. So something which used to be deniable on a paper may not be deniable at all in practice. Okay, so we have an inspiring theory to make cute protocols about deniable authentication. There are many odd things when you introduce some setup assumptions, but deniability is very fragile. It may collapse completely if you introduce some setup assumptions. So I mentioned this for deniability, but it's exactly the same for anonymity. So if you have group signatures, the notion of anonymity can collapse miserably with setup assumptions. It's also the same with undeniable signature, with receipt freeness. In voting schemes, you can make receipt using a trusted agent. You can break many protocols using some setup assumptions. It's a nice theory, but in practice, it may be helpless because it's too fragile. You can easily break it in practice. So the notion of deniability, I think it doesn't fly in practice. Then I will mention another case, which is still related to privacy, but about privacy in RFID. So it's based on some other works I did with some students. So I guess that you're already familiar with RFID tags. So we have seen RFID in passports. We can see RFID in parcels. We can have RFID to tag cows so that we can trace animals, have a record of their disease, whatever, where they have been, and later we can trace the meat until it is sold to the consumers. It's used also in medicine, doors, payment system, and so on. Maybe I will skip a few slides. So the models for RFID protocols has evolved quite a lot. So one model that we can assume in RFID is that imagine that you have an RFID. This RFID has the ability to make some system create some new tags, and then somewhere there will be a bag of free tags. Then the adversary also has the capability to choose some distribution and to draw some RFID tags. So for instance, you can say, I want to see the tag with ID 1, or I want to see either ID 1 or ID 2. So you can choose a random distribution. Then some tag will be selected, and the adversary has no clue which tag was selected following this distribution, but he can still talk to this tag. So after the tag is drawn, he gets some kind of temporary identity so that he can communicate with this tag, but maybe he doesn't know which tag is it. So he can draw a few tags like this. He can communicate with the tag, he can communicate with the reader, and then he can try to run some attacks. So this is the adversarial model. So in terms of oracle calls, so we have an adversary who can call many oracles. He can call an oracle who creates tags. So he can select the ID of the tag, and then the tag would be created and set in a bag of free tags. He can choose some distribution to draw a tag. So when a tag is drawn, then somewhere in some hidden tables, the adversary doesn't see the tables, there is a matching between a temporary identity and the ID of the tag which was drawn. He can also send messages to a tag by naming it with his temporary identity. So he can send some message, get the response. He can sometimes decide to corrupt the tag. So if he corrupts the tags, then he gets the internal state of this tag. He can also decide to release the tag. After a tag was drawn, he can just decide to put it back in the bag of free tags. And then he won't be able to interact with this tag, with this temporary identity anymore, but he can draw it again. He can also launch some new session protocol with the reader, then send some message with the reader by referring to this session ID. And after a protocol is complete with the reader, maybe he can get the result. So the reader is here to identify a tag. So the result of the protocol is a bit saying whether the tag was identified or not. Maybe the protocol failed and the tag was not identified. So imagine that the reader is put on a door. By trying to run the protocol between a tag and the door, you will see if the door opens or not. So that's a bit which is returned here by this result oracle. So with all this oracle call, we can define the notion of security for RFID. So we run it as a game between the adversary and the system. And we say that the adversary wins if one session of the reader identify a tag with some given ID, but the tag with this ID didn't have any matching conversation during this protocol session. So we say that an RFID scheme is secure if for any bounded adversary the probability of success is negligible. So this is a pretty standard definition, and we can construct some pretty good protocols with this model. For privacy is another story. It's not very easy to define privacy. So here is a picture to motivate the notion of privacy. So you have someone who sees a doctor, and there are many people behind who are interested in the result of what the doctor says, what the doctor sees, and so on. There is another picture here about someone who enters to a chemistry, and he's automatically identified because he's wearing some, for instance, a passport or whatever. And then a lady at the cashier just recognized that he's Mr. Handfunnel, and that last time he visited, he bought some hemorrhoid cream, so she can just say you can find the hemorrhoid cream in L6. Okay, that's what can happen. So how to address privacy issues in practice? So in practice, we can just claim that we don't store anything, we don't see anything, we don't listen anything. This is what companies do. They claim that they're not doing this. Or they do this, but they try to sing "Trust in Me." That's another way to address privacy. So, but maybe there is a technical solution to protect, to enforce privacy. And for that, a few years ago, we defined a model for privacy in RFID. So with our previous adversarial model, with all these oracle calls, we now consider an adversary who can interact with all these oracle calls. Let's say that at the end of the game, the adversary receives a table which was made by the draw tag oracle. So draw tag, remember that it's the oracle who selects a tag following the distribution chosen by the adversary, and then it stores in the table a matching between some temporary identities and the ID of the tag. So at the end, the adversary will receive this table, and he must output true or false. He outputs a bit. So we say that the adversary wins if what he answers is true. Problem is that there are many trivial ways to win in this game. You just make an adversary who always output true. Okay? So now we have to distinguish trivial ways to win from non-trivial ones. For this, we will need the notion of simulation. We'll need the notion of blinder. So now between the adversary and the oracles, we introduce a new algorithm which is called a blinder. So the blinder will simulate the behavior of the launch, send, and result oracle. So send is used to interact with the tags and to interact with the reader. Launch is used to create some new sessions with the reader, and result is used to extract the result from a protocol. All the others oracles are maybe used for to interact with the system. So here you create a tag, you free a tag, maybe you corrupt a tag, you draw a tag. But what is connected with the RFID protocol actually is the interaction with these send and result oracles. So here we introduce a blinder who will just let the interaction with the other protocol go. So we will see the interaction between the adversary and this oracle, but these oracles are no longer available, and the blinder has to simulate the response from these protocols, these oracles, sorry. So now we say that a scheme satisfies privacy if for every adversary there exists a blinder such that if you run this experiment or this experiment, the probability to output true is almost the same. The difference between the probability to be true here and to be true here is negligible. So if these two games output the same distribution, essentially, it means that it's a trivial way to win in the game. It's a trivial way because the adversary does not really use the outcome of the send and result oracles. If you always output true, then you have a blinder who just does nothing, and this here, this adversary will always output true as well. Okay, so it's a trivial way to win. So you say that you satisfy privacy is for every adversary there is a blinder which makes this difference negligible. Okay, so that was a definition. And then you have several notions of privacy depending on whether you use the corrupt oracle or the result oracle. So some protocols are made such that you have privacy assuming that no RFID tag is corrupted and that the reader doesn't reveal any information. So you have a kind of matrix here in which, depending on how you use the, if you use the output, you're in this row. If you don't use the output of a protocol, you're in this row, in that row. If you don't use corrupt, you're in this column. If you use corruption, but you're restricted to corrupt only at the end of the game, you're in this middle column. And if you can corrupt at any time, you're in this column. So here you have the strongest notion of privacy in which you allow to use a corruption at any time and to use a result from the reader. The weakest notion is if when you don't allow corruption and you don't allow the output of the reader. So this is called narrow weak privacy. So you have this 2x3 matrix of privacy levels, and what we can do. So there is a very simple protocol. So we can find this protocol at in many different variants in the literature. It's based on a pseudo-random function f here. So every RFID tag has a secret, which is stored in the database. So the reader has access to this database. The reader will send a challenge to the tag. The tag would pick a new random number b, and he will respond by this b and the image of a and b by this pseudo-random function with a key which is equal to his secret. Then the reader will look in the database to see if there is any key satisfying this equation. And we can show that this very simple protocol, assuming that f is a PRF, it's weak private. It works if we don't allow corruption. If we allow the result oracle, but we don't allow corruption, so we're at this level of privacy here. If we allow corruption, it's no longer private, because if you corrupt a tag, you can identify a tag which has been used before in a non-simulatable way, in the sense that you cannot construct a blinder. Maybe you can do better, construct protocol with better notion of privacy. So here we have another protocol in which we use public key cryptography. So here we send a challenge to the tag. The tag will have his identity, and he will use a secret which is again stored in the database, and he will need also the public key of the system. To answer to the challenge, he will just encrypt his ID, his secret, and the challenge he receives using the public key of the system. He will answer with his ciphertext, so the reader will be able to decrypt this to check that the challenge A is correct. He will then look in a database if this ID K pair is correct, and he will identify the tag. So we can show that this very simple protocol based on public key cryptography has a pretty strong notion of privacy, in a sense that if you allow corruption at any time but have no result, then it's private. If you allow corruption only at the end and you allow the result oracle, it's also private, but it doesn't work at the strongest level. Maybe we can wonder, since public key cryptography is a bit expensive for RFID tag, can we do anything better? Then the answer is no. We can show that if we have RFID scheme satisfying privacy at this level, which is the case here, so it satisfies privacy at this level, then we can change this protocol into a key agreement protocol, and with key agreement protocol, we can do some public key cryptography. So somehow, if you want to achieve this notion of privacy, you must have some public key cryptography somewhere. So essentially, you cannot do anything cheaper than this protocol for this level. Maybe you can wonder if you can achieve the strongest notion of privacy, and the answer is no again. So you can show that a scheme which is correct cannot achieve this level of privacy. There is no strong privacy. So to recap, we have a nice model for RFID security and RFID privacy. We have several levels of privacy. We have some nice protocols based on the PRF which satisfy maybe a weak level of privacy. We have another one based on a public key crypto system which is almost the highest level of privacy, and we can show essentially that we can not do anything better, so maybe you can just stop working here. But some people are not satisfied by this result because of the lack of strong privacy. So if we look at the impossibility proof, so I won't go through the proof of impossibility of strong privacy, but essentially somewhere we use an adversary who will interact with the system in a way that he simulates a protocol with the reader. He perfectly knows whether the reader will accept or not, and then he will try to get the result from the protocol, but the result that he gets is something which cannot be simulated by the blinder. That's the contradiction. So we construct an adversary who plays with the reader. He perfectly knows what the reader will answer, but the blinder cannot simulate this. So maybe you can wonder if it is really something which is embarrassing in practice, because it doesn't contradict any notion of privacy. So maybe there is something fishy in the model. So maybe this model is too strong in a sense that some attacks which are not really attacks are forbidden. And this is maybe why strong privacy is impossible. So in order to address that, we have to change a bit the definitions. So the problem here is that the adversary is querying the system to test if the system is behaving correctly. He perfectly knows what the system will respond, but no blinder can simulate the response in a coherent way. But it doesn't mean any attack. So in order to reconcile theory and practice, maybe we should add a capability for the blinder to try to read in the adversary's mind, to try to guess what he should answer, instead of trying to compute the answer by himself. So somehow we need some kind of telepathic blinder who can read into the adversary's mind. So we need to update the definition. So we introduce the telepathic blinders. So the only change that we do here is that now the adversary can have access to the random coins of the adversary. By having access to the random coins, it can just simulate the same computation as the adversary. It can predict what the adversary expects to receive. So that's a very simple change in the definition, except that now to try to prove strong privacy, we need some extra tool. And actually, we again take this very same protocol as before with the public key crypto system. And what we can show is that if this public key crypto system is in CPA secure and it satisfies the notion of plain text awareness, then it achieves the notion of strong privacy. So maybe it's a very strange result because it's exactly the same protocol as before, but now it satisfies strong privacy because we have changed the definition. Maybe we have put some extra assumption on a public key crypto system, but it's exactly the same protocol. So in practice, it doesn't make any difference. So the notion of plain text awareness is based on some work by Bellary and Palaccio in 2004. Notion of plain text awareness means that if you create a ciphertext, if you create a valid ciphertext, you must know the associated plain text. And this is what we need to prove this result. So when the adversary tries to interact with the system and sends some valid ciphertext here, he must know the correct plaintext, and this is why he can predict what is the answer from the system. So this is the intuition of why we need plaintext awareness. Okay? So to wrap up, so with the updated notion, we can achieve with plaintext aware cryptography the strongest notion of privacy. We can show that this level of privacy is equivalent to public key cryptography. That's also doable with public key cryptography, of course. This is doable with a PRF only. We can show that this level is, can be achieved with a random oracle. We can show, so this is impossible without public key cryptography. What is open is whether we can achieve this level of privacy without random oracle and only with a PRF. So we have no clue if we can achieve this level of privacy without public key cryptography, or even this level without public key cryptography. So this is still left open. So we have a theory which helped to identify good protocols. The one based on public key crypto system was a good one, but the model was incorrect, and we had to fight with the model to prove that this protocol was okay, but it didn't change anything in practice. So we needed the notion of plaintext awareness, and by the way, this notion of plaintext awareness, does it make any change in practice? If you have some in-CCA secure crypto system, we don't know how to generate valid ciphertext without knowing the plaintext. So maybe in practice, the in-CCA secure crypto systems that we are using are all plaintext aware. So it doesn't make any change in practice to use this protocol. So we had to fight with theory, but except for strengthening our confidence, the theory had actually no impact at all on the practice. Okay, so here is another picture about how we can serve privacy in practice. So if you try to say that you want to implant RFID tag to someone, everybody will complain. But if you say that this RFID tag is also a cell phone and it has a digital camera and MP3 player, you will say, yes, I want to have this implant. So it's another way to address privacy in practice. Okay, so to conclude this talk, I think a theory, especially for cryptanalysis, must be supported by experiments. Maybe the theory helped to strengthen our confidence in some protocols. Maybe it helped in designing good protocols, but concretely, the influence on theory was very little, except strengthening our confidence. I don't think that the theory had a very big impact on the practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Serge. We're running slightly behind schedule, and I can see coffee out there. I can even see biscuits. So I suggest that we defer questions to Serge for now. I guess Serge will be happy to talk to people in the coffee break. So let's all grab some coffee, and then I think we have to have our photograph taken.
Yeah, photograph taken out there.
Out there, so...
Wrap it all.
First, if you may.
All right,
And then
here's our
you
photograph.
can have a coffee.
Okay.
Go out of this door across here. We're going to try and assemble on the wall at the side.
Okay, it's cold out there, so put your coats or jackets on or something. Yeah.